Tennessee. I spent some time, we were talking a little bit about, the football players coming from Arizona Western to UT, or Tennessee, if you happen to be watching in from Austin and don't know who that is. But I mentioned this Arizona Western. That's like, Yuma, Arizona is not, Dixie, West Virginia here. This is not some, one stoplight town. There's 100,000 people there. Spent some time there. The Padres used to train there. It's right on the border of Mexico and California, this sort of thing. But, kind of isolated, but, still, it's 90-odd thousand, I'm sure, in outlying communities, There are 100,000. There aren't a lot of sports there. Padres used to train there. The biggest sports there is Arizona Western Junior College. But because of that, what I noticed when I was down there is that, people weren't out and about wearing team gear in Arizona, at least not where I was. You might see an occasional Cardinals gear, but outside of that, no, there wasn't Diamondbacks, there wasn't Suns. That was Phoenix. This was Yuma. And there wasn't any, really big following from what I saw there for the Wildcats or the Sun Devils, Arizona State. And I mentioned this because how different that is to, say, the Tri-Cities and their support of Tennessee athletics. I mean, I comment on this and say, shouldn't you be focusing a little more on the home team there, ETSU? And I talk ETSU from time to time. Shouldn't you be focusing a little bit more there? Well, maybe not. That maybe it doesn't work out that way. But yeah, just where the allegiances lie and such. So I've talked about how desirable the Tennessee football coaching position is in 2017. Okay. And I don't think it was as desirable as it was, say, in 1992. Or maybe even in 2009. Bigger TV money. It's evened the playing field. Now Vanderbilt beats Tennessee with some amount of regularity. You can't blame that all on Butch Jones. You'd like to, but you can't. Profitable program? Absolutely. But Arizona doesn't have quite that following. Maybe it doesn't have quite that pressure. I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing. But it certainly doesn't have the profits. And the one thing that I think keeps the hope of Tennessee, a resurgence of athletics there alive, is, frankly, the fact that, the fan base believes that Tennessee can win. There are a lot of fan bases that, when the team starts to lose, they go, okay, yeah, that's it. And also the administration at Tennessee, that really, how can I explain? They've, I know when John Curry was made the AD. Well, let's get this, John Curry. He said, I think Tennessee should have the best athletic department in the country, which it probably was in 98. I don't know if it can be that now. I don't know if it can compete with the Floridas and the Southern Californias. It simply hasn't happened recently, and that's where the athletes are. You got to look at the Stanford. I mean, I know Sports Illustrated picks Stanford as having the best overall athletic program in the country a few years ago or such. But, Stanford wins a lot for having a lower admittance rate than Harvard. Think about that for a little bit. Yeah, they do. It's actually tougher to get into Stanford than it is Harvard. If you look at it, I think it's 4.9% of applicants go into Stanford, whereas 5.1% of applicants are accepted to Harvard. I don't know. Tennessee is more than 50%. ETSU is everybody. I mean, you have to, as long as you spell your name right on the application. I mean, it's like 90% get approved to go to ETSU. But anyway, just wanted to point that out there. There is some talk here with Tennessee, actually, about reducing the Board of Trustees. And this is a story to watch because so much of what happens in college athletics, who wins and who loses, is based upon coaching, yes, but athletic philosophy as well. ETSU is a great example of this, the differences between Paul Stanton and Brian Nolan in the president's chair. And there has been a real clean sweep, with the exception maybe of, say, a Fred Warren. In terms of athletics, Warren, the golf coach at ETSU, a long time there. But I even spoke with him at the announcement of Randy Sanders being named the head football coach at ETSU. And guess what? He was even talking about the previous administration, and not in such a glowing way. Didn't name it by name, but it didn't make any bones about who he was talking about. So there you go with that. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about reducing the Board of Trustees. Also tomorrow, Jerry Bonkowski has written a column he is really proud about. And he contacted me this morning and said, you need to watch this. It's about the NHRA, which is, normally not in my wheelhouse. I'll be brutally honest with you there. But talking about the changing of the guards in the NHRA, National Hot Rod Association. Of course, you got Bristol Dragway, but and I was reading through the piece this morning, and what I found very interesting about that piece was that I found that the problems of NHRA, sponsorship and all this, duplicate what we've seen in NASCAR. And also a changing of the guard in terms of personalities, drivers, etc. It's going on throughout motorsports. So tomorrow we'll likely have Jerry Bonkowski on to discuss this in the future here. So Jerry Bonkowski, of course, NBCSports.com. If you want to read his piece, and I'll try to get you that here. It is on NBCSports.com. Do a Google search, NHRA, Jerry Bonkowski, and NBCSports.com ought to come up. And some pretty good reading there that I think you ought to check out. We'll have him on tomorrow on Tri-City Sports Now to talk about it. A final note in this segment, because we were talking a little bit about began the show talking about Mike Ayers, no longer the coach at Wofford. It's now Josh Conklin. End of an era. Ayers, of course, got his start as a head coach at ETSU with 3 years in which he went 11-21. Actually, 11-21-1. There are no more ties, so I guess, overtime losses, or so I'm trying to think. Of course, there's the overtime victory against Mercer this year for ETSU. I'm trying to remember that I don't believe there were any overtime games in the first year of ETSU football, and I'm sort of racking my brain trying to remember if there were overtime games. I don't believe there were. Or was Western an overtime game? No, you know what? Kennesaw State was an overtime game. Second year. Bucks won that one in overtime. So I don't know. 11-22 but versus 11-21-1. Nobody was talking about the foundation that Mike Ayers had created. And maybe they should have, because Billy Taylor was playing for the team back then, and now he's officially the defensive coordinator. He was for Paul Hamilton too. You tell me. About that. I said ETSU has a way of telling you everything is wonderful when things are 11-22. Anyway, I did want to mention, there's some talk, and this has always been talked about with ETSU, is attendance. Reported figures, actual figures. I remember one time ETSU played, this was, well, let's go more contemporarily. I've reported on this show how against Samford last game at Kermit-Tipton. I guess they played the summer practice game there, but last game at Kermit-Tipton against Samford, possibly ETSU's biggest victory since restoring football. Possibly. It's their only victory against a postseason team. A last-second kick at the end by J.J. German, winning the game 15-14. And I remember being there and counting the fans in the stands. You can do that. I mean, and that's not a good sign when you can actually go out and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there were 549 people there. Now, the official attendance count was 6,000. When you do that, you count the band, you count the people. It was a cold day. I'm sure some people left early. You count the people in the press box. Sometimes it's been known to count the players, and even things like plumbers on call have been known to be there that they will count. But there's an idea of fill freedom. This is now a big thing going on because really there is, it seems, a different era in ETSU basketball coming about. And really, although I did think that the Ed DeChellis years, I really think Ed DeChellis restored basketball to ETSU. Zaki and Wadood and Gerald Fields, Ben Rhoda, those guys. I mean, I thought that was made the NCAAs in back-to-back seasons. So you tell me. Of course, Murray Bartow was the coach the second year. But nevertheless, and there were, regular season SoCon titles before then. I really thought that Chillis restored a lot of pride to ETSU basketball and really put it back on the winning track. Difference here is this team, and ranked by NBCSports.com's mid-major poll number 8 now. Perhaps ETSU might be taking some steps to becoming a nationally ranked team again. I've talked to Steve Forbes about that. He thinks it's possible. But yet attendance not what it once was. Okay, some of the shine has gone off. When you win at first, there's the honeymoon period. I do think there's a problem with college basketball, plain and simple, in that the regular season is meaningless. But I think that you are also looking at a circumstance in which that's not a good place to play, Freedom Hall. You're subservient to a high school. Talked about, the new soccer team coming out in Nashville. Let's build a new neighborhood almost around the new stadium with restaurants and bars and stores and so on and so forth. That's what you want around an arena. Look what they're doing in Atlanta with the Braves in SunTrust Park. It is the antithesis of this at ETSU games now. I mean, I'm almost thinking that at ETSU games now, you got the people living in that neighborhood, and they got to be worried, get off my lawn, that sort of thing. It's a difficult sell to go to games because there's nothing around it. Oh, so you're saying you should go to the back to the mini dome, Marky? Not necessarily. Although I do think that because of its additional seating capacity, the mini dome allows things to happen for ETSU that just can't happen at Freedom Hall. More tickets sold, possibly having a conference tournament at the dome like the ASUN tournament was played there about 10 years ago. Getting major opponents in because you can sell 12,000 seats, theoretically at least, instead of just 6,000 and change. All this stuff, I think you've got some... But more than that, I think that it's time to start, and I've said this until I'm blue in the face, area needs a new arena. I'd build it 10,000. Not quite the Herculean task to fill for the mini dome, but also not too small that you're always regulated to what Freedom Hall is. 10,000, you can bring in better concerts. 10,000, you can bring in better teams for ETSU to play. 10,000, you're probably not going to sell that for indoor football or minor league hockey, but you can build the place large enough so that you can have that area on the floor. 10,000, you can have, major religious revivals or whatever events that there are. 10,000 becomes a challenging goal for ETSU to draw, but, once upon a time for 2 straight years, they average 8,400. Is it that impossible? I don't know. It's just a nice round figure. I look at the concerts that could be brought in at a facility that holds 10,000. I remember when Freedom Hall, they shot the Ragdoll video there. That's a long time ago, 31 years ago. But, you had things like that. That's when that capacity of an arena was in vogue. It's not anymore. They talk about this. I know Elton John played there a couple of years ago. But when was the last time anyone of that ilk played Freedom Hall? I mean, that's been the event of Freedom Hall for the century. Elton John, really. Meanwhile, you have, a lot of take-your-pick concerts from back in the day, in the 20th century when I was young. Be it Aerosmith, be it AC/DC. Obviously, I'm a rock fan. Hey, I had to close out the first hour with, the old tagline from AC/DC, let's face it. Elvis that's been famous. Metallica played there, I believe. I can remember people all excited about Poison. I remember a friend of mine actually, when I went to University High, and I know this dates me, but it was such a wonderful memory. Got backstage, I think, and Lita Ford, there's a name from the past, played there, and he was in love, which I would have been too, because evidently Lita wearing leather pants, crossing her legs and asking my friend, so you're in a band too? That sort of thing, and taking interest in a young teenage boy. Yeah, you can imagine that was really big back in the day. I mean, hey, oh my goodness. But there's this effort to fill Freedom. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how a new arena would get built if Freedom Hall isn't filled. On the other hand, I know ETSU mentality. Everything is wonderful the way it is. And so if they do fill Freedom, I almost think you're capping the potential success and growth of the program. It's a catch-22 for ETSU basketball. When I come back, hey, you know that there is an SEC team, the college baseball ratings. There's preseason going on for that already. I'm going to tell you who some people think are going to win the national championship. It's an SEC team. Also, we talked about Rich Rodriguez getting canned. There are other coaches on the hot seat, and one who got off the hot seat. And I'll tell you all about that when we come back on Tri-City Sports Now. The Tanasi Arts and Heritage Center in Unicoi, Tennessee was created to showcase